For 20 years, the galaxy thought humanity was weak, quiet, dependent. But when Earth went silent, the stars learned a terrifying truth. We weren't hiding because we were afraid. We were remembering who we really are. Deep beneath the mountain citadel of Aurelia, Envoy Cale Thorne exhaled slowly. 2 decades of forced pleasantries and diplomatic theater. Finally over. Transmit the flare to Solus, he said to his aide, Mara. Phase Obsidian begins now. The stone-clad briefing vault echoed with silence. Inside, the most influential minds of humanity had gathered, military tacticians beside quantum theorists, trade barons beside terraforming guild heads. All eyes were fixed on the central display. High Marshal Alira Voss stood beneath it, her silver-trimmed command jacket unwrinkled, her steel-gray hair a precision cut. Behind her, a hollow clock pulsed. 3 minutes remained. Envoy Thorne and the outreach unit have departed Helix Terminal, she declared. Phase Obsidian is engaged. A low murmur swept through the crowd. Unease flickered in many eyes, thrill in a few. Mankind had been bracing for this moment for over a decade, but anticipation turned brittle now that the storm had arrived. The vault doors hissed open. Dr. Kieran Vale burst in, disheveled and breathless. Lead architect of the Deadless Initiative, his lab coat was spattered with espresso and nanofluid. His hair looked like static had been trying to escape his scalp. Apologies, he said, slumping beside Commander Juno Krell. We've just finished calibrating the Aegis arrays. Krell, broad-shouldered and razor-eyed, offered a subtle nod. Do they hold? Dr. Vale allowed himself a crooked grin. Stronger than projections. The new fields deflect every weapon class the Dominions ever deployed. The countdown struck 0. The screen shifted. Envoy Thorne's face appeared, transmission beaming from his vessel, the Duskwing, as it arced homeward toward Solus Prime. They responded exactly as we mapped, he reported. They expect surrender, desperation in days. Marshal Voss advanced toward the center. Then we execute the next step. All fleets initiate Operation Ghostwake. Across Earth's shadow ports and lunar subfoundries, the great machine of exile surged to life. Ships cloaked in secrecy emerged from camouflaged bunkers. Crates of cryo-rations and GravTech modules were loaded. In the distant red soil of Phobos and beneath the icy crust of Callistris, dormant weapon silos came online. Defense systems hidden since the Pax Accords flickered awake. In the Scorvale complex, deep under Arizona's scorched plains, Dr. Rena Solari oversaw her engineers as they mounted vortex drives onto long-range haulers. These drives, built upon Dominion schematics, but radically overhauled, could outrun anything known and slip past most detection webs. Will 24 hours be enough? Her apprentice, Mara, asked quietly. Dr. Solari didn't look up. It must be. They'll realize something's off once our orbital convoys skip their rotation. We've got 36 hours at best. High above the stratosphere, aboard the long-range patrol vessel Verdict's Reach, Captain Iron Kale reread the new commands glowing on his terminal. He blinked, then read them again. Plot course for the Virex excavation ring, he told the helm. We need to dock before the Dominion smells the fire. At his side, Lieutenant Nira Shea turned. That sector's no longer beyond our range, Kale said flatly. Every outpost bearing our banner falls under our shield now. The Dominion's favor is gone. We guard our own. In the spire halls of Novaterra, the Global Assembly convened under crimson alert. High Chancellor Raven addressed the delegates with solemn clarity. For too long, he said, the Dominion has treated us like second-tier vassals, stripping our vaults, draining our workforce, offering crumbs in return. That era ends now. Today, we reclaim our sovereignty. Uneasy glances traded across the marble floor. But what if they retaliate? A defense strategist asked quietly. General Krell stood tall, his voice like distant thunder. Our defenses have matured in silence. They've never seen what we're truly capable of, because we've never had cause to show them. Across void-piercing stations and dust-blown colonies, encrypted orders flowed. Freighters veered from their plotted courses. Cloak turrets awoke from hibernation. The coded directive echoed from Terran command to the farthest rim enclaves. Stand your ground. Hold fast. Reinforcements are rising. Back in Virilia, High Marshal Voss reviewed the star map glimmering across the war table. Phase 1 has begun, she murmured. The clock is ticking. We have 6 months before they realize what slipped through their grasp. Dr. Vale's fingers paused over his console. And the X-935 core shipments? The Dominion leans heavily on those. Voss's expression darkened. Precisely, Doctor. People only understand the worth of something once it vanishes. Light years away, on the crystalline world of Oristha, the Grand Concordium's chamber loomed cavernous and cold. 5 of the 7 high seats were occupied. 2 remained glaringly vacant. This is absurd, hissed Minister Keelix, her iridescent tendrils writhing with impatience. The humans will slink back like they always do. Why summon an emergency quorum? But Consul Dravy, the youngest, seemed pale, even for one of azure blood. His voice trembled. 2 full cycles. Not a single Terran vessel has crossed our ports. Not one transmission through the relay webs. Then the colossal gates groaned open. Overlord Zarek entered, accompanied by Matron Silex of the Hive-born brood. They took their seats without ceremony. Commence, Zarek said, his violet carapace catching the glow of the twin suns. The Terrans have vacated Concordium space. Fully. Every conduit, every relay dark. Silex clacked her jaw palps in sharp agitation. They behave like petulant spawn. Discipline is warranted. What kind of discipline? Dravy asked quietly. Mobilize dreadships. Fly them to Solis. Teach them obedience. For what charge? Objected Minister Curie. They've broken no treaty. They still hold binding mineral accords. My people rely on the alloys from their mining crescents. Zarek raised 2 of his 4 obsidian claws for silence. I move that we seize all Terran-linked assets held in Dominion reserves, he declared. Freeze their accounts. Lock them out of the stellar gates. His gaze hardened. If they cannot barter, and they cannot move, they will remember who holds the stars. 6 of the 7 Concordium seats lit green without hesitation. Only Dravy paused, his eyes uncertain, then finally touched the console. It is done, Zarek announced. They will learn the hard truth. Without us, they do not endure. And so the word spread. On crystal moons and scorched city planets, a storm of speculation ignited. Some laughed at the Terrans, an upstart race with more fire than foresight. Others barely noticed. In the grand chessboard of interstellar power, Earth was just another pawn leaving the table. In a smoke-filled tavern on Oristha, a flickering hollow feed played over a bar. It showed Terran envoys sealing their embassy gates. Good riddance, grunted a Vidari trader, his spined shoulders hunched over a glass of fire foam. They never honored tradition. Always digging, always questioning, trying to twist our ways. His companion, a 4-eyed merchant with jade skin, snorted agreement. They'll come crawling back. Where else can they hawk their tech? Who else will shield them from the Promath pillagers? At the Concordium's high command, General Gorak of Dravith, towering, crimson-skinned, and scarred from 3 interstellar wars, examined the latest surveillance reports. He respected only force. Have the Terrans repositioned their fleet? He asked, his voice gravel. His aide, a pale creature with webbed limbs, shook their head. No, General. All vessels remain confined to their local system. But they've gone dark. No signals. No pings. Nothing. Gorak growled, a deep vibration like tectonic plates shifting. Keep a constant eye. I don't believe in sudden silence. Meanwhile, within the Commerce Ministry, datapads began to pile up. Delicacies grown only in Terran soil vanished, from luxury menus. Construction on high-orbit stations halted. Crucial Earth-forged alloys undelivered. 3 major entertainment houses canceled their shows. Their human scriptwriters had abruptly departed. Minister Felix waved a tendril dismissively. Minor turbulence, he assured his staff. Replace what you can. Adapt. The market find a way. But weeks turned into fortnights, then into cycles. Still no contact, no pleas, no apologies. In the inner conclave, the Concordium elite reconvened. Zarek addressed them with growing impatience. Still nothing, he said. We should send a diplomatic unit, Dravy offered. Reopen lines. Gauge intentions. Keelix let out a chittering laugh that bounced off the silver walls. To approach them now? That reeks a weakness. No, they will come first, on their knees. And if they don't, Dravy asked quieter now, then they shall reap the weight of their arrogance. Zarek said coldly. They are a sapling species in a storm. Without roots, without us, they will be torn apart. At that moment, a young courier slipped into the chamber and approached Matron Silex. She skimmed the transmission and froze. Her compound eyes expanded. There's been an incident near the human perimeter, she said. The Promaxti clan struck one of our extraction satellites. The others straightened. Tension crackled. They annihilated the entire platform. Zarek's voice turned sharp. Where were our sentry ships? Matron Silex met his gaze. Her mandibles clicked once, then was always under Terran patrol, Silex murmured, eyes still on the report. Elsewhere, claxons tore through the stillness of General Gorik's quarters. He emerged fully alert, armor half-donned, storming into the Dominion Command Nexus. On the primary viewport, a crimson beacon pulsed at the edge of Terran-claimed space. Status, he barked. His deputy, Velnik, a deep blue Arcturian, looked grim. 3 more extraction hubs hit by Promaxti warbands. Same sector, same pattern. 42 casualties. 17 unaccounted for. All cargo stripped. Gorik bared his serrated fangs in a growl. Where were our response wings? Velnik gestured to the star map, glowing with rapid pings. Deployed too late again. They're striking here, and here. Exactly where the Terran Guardians used a patrol. 3 months had passed since humanity severed ties with the Dominion. At first, the Council considered it a tantrum, an inconvenience, not a crisis. But now doubt crept in. Send an inquiry to Solus, Gora commanded. Demand explanation for their absence in border defense. An hour later, Velnik returned, jaw tight. The screen flickered. No visuals. Only text. Diplomatic lines closed. Terran Defense Compact no longer operates on behalf of Dominion sectors. Across the stars, in a quiet port city on Arxelia 3, Trade Syndicate Chairwoman Riva paced through a cavernous depot. Months ago, the air here was thick with aromas, Terran coffee blends, rich cacao, hand-poured vintages, artisan crafts loved by the wealthy elite. Now the shelves sat bare. My clients are furious, she muttered. They crave the earth-made delicacies. Her aide, a short, moss-skinned Andari, consulted a glowing slate. We've pinged every Earth-based supplier 10 times. No replies. All requests bounce. Riva stepped to the bay window, watching the dockyard below. Rows of ships sat dormant, crews idle, waiting for cargo that would never come. It's more than sweets and luxuries, she whispered. The repair bays are shutting down. Terran engineers are gone. And the amphitheaters, they echo. The human performers vanished. On the Dominion capital world of Zirithkai, an emergency petition was filed. It took 3 cycles before a delegation of high-tier industrialists was granted audience with the Grand Concordium. The humans must be restored, declared Kelrath, proprietor of the largest astral vessel factory in Dominion space. My shipyards are running at 40%. Terran labor was irreplaceable. My think tanks are crumbling without them, added Dr. Velma, director of the Arcforge Institute. They approach problems with such strange elegance. They dream in directions we can't fathom. Zarek listened, his 4 eyes narrowing. Irritation bloomed behind his composed face. "We've dispatched 6 formal communiques," he said at last, voice like coiled stone. "They all reply the same." "And still they refuse," Dravy said, voice low. "Then offer incentives," proposed Krax, his bio-visor flickering. Clearly, they're holding out for leverage. Helix's tendrils coiled in fury. "We do not bargain with those who mock the Concordium. Let them return with humility, or not at all." Their bickering halted as a junior clerk entered, whispering urgently into Dravy's ear. The young consul's blue hue drained several shades lighter. "We have a new complication," he announced, voice taut. "The latest X-935 shipment from the Terran colonies never arrived." A cold silence gripped the chamber. X-935, indispensable to astral drive systems, powered every vessel in Dominion space. Without it, ships couldn't be launched or even repaired. "How long can we stretch our stores?" Zarek asked, eyes narrowing. "At current demand?" Dravy checked his holoslate. 5.5 months. Maybe less. "We must locate an alternative source," someone muttered. Later, behind sealed alloy doors in the innermost vault of Concordium Command, the 7 gathered without press or aids. The air was thick with tension. "Perhaps we miscalculated," admitted Matron Silex. "They are not crawling back. They're not even looking over their shoulder." "They're bluffing," Helix insisted. "They'll break. They must. No species survives alone." Dravy scrolled through intersector reports, his voice calm but edged. "With respect, it appears we're the ones under strain, not them." For a long moment, no one spoke. Zarek stood and turned toward the window, gazing out over the crystalline towers of Zirith-Kai. "Prepare a diplomatic cruiser," he said at last. "We'll send an emissary, with terms." "Terms," hissed Silex. "What terms?" "Whatever takes," Zarek replied, "within reason to bring them back." The vessel Harmony's promise slipped into the edge of Solus-bound space. Its hull gleamed silver blue, the sigil of the Dominion bright against the black. Captain Lux of the Arcturon fleet stood at the command dais. His objective was clear: rekindle Terran allegiance. "We've received a ping from Solus Defense Grid," his comms officer reported. "Patch it through," Lux ordered. A human figure appeared, an officer in deep navy, 5 silver stars on each shoulder. Her eyes were sharp, unreadable. "This is Admiral Dalen Vora of the Solus Defense Accord," she said. "Identify your intent." Lux gave a formal nod. "Admiral, I bring an official appeal from the Dominion Concordium. We request to reopen diplomatic engagement." Admiral Vora's expression didn't shift. "Transmit your statement. We will evaluate." "I've been granted clearance to negotiate directly," Lux pressed. "In person, transmit." "Your message," Vora repeated unmoved. "You are not cleared for entry into Solus territory. If you proceed, we will respond with force." The screen blinked black. Captain Lux turned to his bridge crew, stunned. This was not the welcome they had prepared for. On Solus, deep within the Earthborn strategic bastion, Admiral Vora stood beside Envoy Calethorn and the Terran Assembly. "They reviewed their proposal," Envoy Calethorn said, eyes scanning the message feed. "They're offering full trade reinstatement plus a 10% reduction in tribute tariffs." Dr. Kieran Vale scoffed audibly. "That's their olive branch? After scheming to seize our colonies." "They're bleeding," muttered General Juno Krell, pointing to the final clause. "They're begging for immediate resumption of X-935 supply chains." Admiral Vora gave a slow nod. "Exactly as projected. Half a cycle without our element, and their entire war fleets falling apart." Back on Zirith-Kai, inside the High Concordium spire, biologist-analyst Dr. Zeliv presented his findings. His tendrils quivered as he addressed the 7. Our expedition surveyed 17 systems, he said. We located X-935 in only 3 zones, all outside Terran control. Keelix leaned forward. Then we mined them. Dr. Zilov shifted uneasily and activated the holodisplay. The first source lies beneath an ocean 10 kilometers deep, on a supergravity world. The second is embedded near the mantle of a planet with unstable tectonics. The third floats in a radiation-heavy asteroid field. Zarek's eyes narrowed. Your point. We can extract from these zones, Zilov said slowly, but costs will be quintuple the Terran price. Worse, only Earth-designed equipment can function in such conditions. Silence fell. So we don't just need their resources, Draby murmured. We need their ingenuity, too. I'm not finished, Zilov added. Our historical team uncovered something peculiar in deep archives. The holoscreen changed. A star map flickered to life, ancient and worn. It displayed Solus and its surrounding systems. This is over 10 millennia old, Zilov said. One of our oldest preserved maps. Note the marker over Earth. A glowing symbol pulsed faintly over Sol's third planet. It's labeled in archaic glyphs, he continued. Translation: Seat of the Wardens. Matron Silexa's compound eyes expanded. Wardens of what? We don't yet know, Zilov admitted. But it implies Earth once held great power, possibly predating our civilizations entirely. Their history may have been masked even from themselves. The chamber broke into gasps and overlapping voices. In orbit above Solus, the Terran stronghold Bastion Prime floated in serene defiance, circling the planet like a silent sentinel. Inside, Captain Ironcale conferred with command delegates from each Terran enclave. The Dominion cruiser is still holding at sector's edge, Kale reported. 3 more transmissions in the last 24 hours, each requesting an audience. What's our response? Asked Captain Jane Shea, newly promoted and now commanding her own vessel. The doors opened. Envoy Thorn entered with Admiral Vora at his side. We wait, Thorn said, a faint smirk at the corner of his mouth. Let them stew in silence for once. Admiral Vora tapped a control. The war room's map flared to life, revealing a star chart. Blue markers Terran fleets, extended far beyond Solus, deep into previously unclaimed space. While they scramble to reclaim what they lost, she said quietly, we've been building something more. Refrain from contact, Vora finished. We've now seeded 4 new colonies beyond their long-range scans. And our engineers, she tapped the console. A glowing schematic of a new energy lattice flickered to life, have created a shield matrix the Dominion can't even comprehend. Envoy Thorn turned to face the gathered command. So the question now is, what do we want from them? He looked across the room, veteran officers from every Terran frontier. They need us, desperately, but do we still need them? A young lieutenant raised her hand. Sir, why not just leave them behind? We're thriving. Alone. Thorn's expression darkened, then softened. Because solitude isn't the objective. Cooperation built the stars. But this time, it must be on equal ground. Not as tools. As allies. Elsewhere, aboard the Dominion vessel Harmony's Promise, Captain Lux read his latest dispatch with disbelief. Set a course for Solus, he ordered. We're cleared to extend them full Concordium status. Effective immediately. The announcement rippled like lightning. From Earth's orbital rings to the tundra domes of Enceladus, it raced across the Terra network. After decades of subservience, the Concordium had just offered humanity full galactic membership. Inside the Terran Command Center beneath the former White House, leaders and fleet commanders filled the war room. Admiral Vora stood at the head of a table, unreadable. They want peace now, General Krell scoffed. What they want is X-935 and our tech back in their vaults. The moment they're stable, we're disposable again. Envoy Thorn shook his head. I've watched them for 20 years. Many of them are genuine, but they're crumbling, and they know it. President Laura Grant, tall, composed, eyes like still water, remained quiet as debates raged. "Intel analysis?" she finally asked. Dr. Rena Solari activated a glowing map of Concordium territory. "Their fleets are deteriorating without Terran fuel. 3 inner colonies report food instability. Freight lines are failing. And Promaxti raids are pushing deeper. They're barely holding their borders." Thorne gave a slight nod. "Perfect moment to talk," he said. "Or to act," countered Vora. She pressed a control pad. A window opened on the main display. "Captain Gregor Marn, status update." The screen revealed a grizzled man with a deep scar over his cheek and shadows under his eyes. "Admiral," he said, "my battle group is holding formation. Low orbit over Concordium Prime. Stealth lattice is flawless. They don't even know we're here." Silence. No one in the room moved. "You've stationed ships over their capital?" President Grant asked, stunned. "Without triggering alerts?" Vora nodded. "As they've hovered near Earth. Countless times. The difference? They've always known we could see them. They just never realized how close we could get." On Zereth Kai, chaos simmered under the gilded walls of the council spire. All 7 sat at the high dais, flanked by military and scientific advisors. "The Terrans haven't responded to our proposal," Zarek said. His voice edged with frustration. Zarek's violet scales had lost their luster, stress dimming their natural glow. "We must re-establish dominance," hissed Mector, his mandibles grinding in frustration. "Deploy the Grand Armada to Solus. Let them see who governs this galaxy." Dravy recoiled, alarmed. "You're proposing intimidation over a fuel dispute." "Not war," snapped Keelix, his tendrils curling. "Just a reminder. We've shielded them for generations. They owe us." Despite Dravy's resistance, the vote held. The Concordium would dispatch 60 warships, the largest assembly in half a century. 3 days later, hyperspace tore open near Neptune's orbit. A fleet like a tide of metal emerged. Flagship Empyreans reach leading the formation. Commander Vakes, tall and cold-eyed, stared out toward the pale blue world in the distance. "Transmit to Earth," he ordered. "Inform them that the Concordium Armada is here to escort their officials for negotiations." His comms officer hesitated, scanning her console. "Sir, we're detecting unusual energy patterns across the system, but no visible ships." Then space shimmered. Invisible fortresses bloomed to life, anchored to moons, planets, orbital belts. Entire defense grids revealed themselves in a flicker. Tech unlike anything the Concordium had cataloged. "Sir," yelled the sensor chief, "hundreds of Terran vessels, decloaking around us. They've been here the whole time." Ships emerged from veiled pockets of space, silent, predatory, locked in a perfect net around the Armada. A human face filled the command screen, calm, sharp-eyed, wearing the insignia of Earth's Defense Accord. "This is Admiral Garan Martin of the Solar Security Fleet," he said. "Concordium vessel, you've entered restricted space with armed warships. This act is considered hostile." Commander Vakes straightened. "We arrive under diplomatic authority. You have 30 minutes to exit this system," Admiral Martin said flatly, cutting him off. "You are surrounded. This isn't a discussion." Vakes stared at his sensor feed. The Terran ships were smaller, less armored, but surrounded them at every vector. And all weapons were primed. "They're bluffing," muttered his second officer. "Their firepower can't breach our hulls." As if in response, a single Terran scout ship discharged a test volley into deep space. The energy output was staggering. It sliced through vacuum like a god's hammer. Had it struck Empyrean's reach, there would have been no debris left to salvage. Vakes' voice dropped to a whisper. "Open fleet-wide comms." He swallowed. "All ships disengage. Reverse vector. We're retreating." "But sir, the High Council doesn't understand what we've just seen," Vake snapped. "These are not the humans we once knew." As the Concordium fleet turned and fled, Admiral Martin's voice returned one last time. Next time, schedule your arrival. It's called manners. Back on Zerethkai, the council chamber was frozen. The air was leaden with silence. Commander Vakes had just completed his full report. The chamber was silent, every breath held as the transmission ended. They surrounded us with hundreds of ships, Commander Vakes reported, voice low, each equipped with systems we've never encountered. They could have erased our fleet in moments. Zarek's once glimmering scales had faded to a pale lavender. Why didn't they strike? They had every advantage. They didn't come to destroy, Vakes replied. They came to deliver a message. You're not in control anymore. He turned and exited, leaving the seven staring at one another, shaken. For decades, they had seen humanity as unruly apprentices, ambitious but inferior. But the truth had been hiding in plain sight. They were never weak, Dravy whispered. His skin, usually a vibrant blue, had paled. They waited, learned, grew. For 20 cycles we patronized them, he continued. And all that time they could have crushed us. But they chose restraint. Elsewhere, deep within the Concordium's grand archives, Dr. Zila's research team combed through relics and records long dismissed as myth. We were wrong, he told his assistant, pulling up a hololith from the Arcturon vaults. The projection showed a carved stone tablet etched with figures tall and humanoid, surrounded by falling stars. The inscription calls them wanderers from the sky. He switched to a second file, a weathered tome from Keelix's people. Ancient illustrations showed ships descending from the heavens, bringing tools, healing devices, salvation. They saved entire civilizations, Zilov said, thousands of years ago, and then they vanished. One by one, each council species had similar entries buried in their oldest records, visitors who looked unmistakably human, arriving in times of crisis, offering aid, then fading into legend. It wasn't coincidence. It was a forgotten truth. Zilov compiled his findings into a secure report, marked urgent. The conclusion was undeniable. Humans had once been starfarers, wielding knowledge that outpaced every council civilization. For reasons still unknown, they had turned inward, hidden themselves on a single world. Until now, back on Earth, beneath the granite peaks of the Rocky Mountains, Dr. Kieran Vale worked in a secure facility, known to only a few in Terran leadership. Before him rested a disk of seamless metal, impossibly smooth, etched with indecipherable glyphs. It had been uncovered beneath ancient ruins, its origin a mystery for over 50 years. President Laura Grant stood beside him, her face shadowed with awe. "Are you certain?" she asked. Vale gave a solemn nod. "This artifact predates any human writing. It's over 50,000 years old. But the metallurgy, the core energy, none of it aligns with our modern science." And yet, he turned the disk. Symbols pulsed faintly beneath its surface. It belongs to us. It's human. But from a version of us we don't remember. Admiral Vora entered, having reviewed the latest scans. "So it's true," she said. "All the old stories, the myths. We once crossed the stars, helped civilizations rise. And then we lost everything." "It appears so," Vale replied. "And here's the proof." He held up a genetic readout, data streams flowing in the air between them. "Encoded in our DNA, subtle, dormant traits. Evolutionary markers consistent with long-range adaptation, high radiation tolerance, even non-planetary habitation." President Grant looked at the disk, then the glowing map behind them, one that now included hundreds of Terran colonies and hidden fleets. "Then we're not just survivors," she said quietly. "We're something more. Engineered for deep space survival. Their DNA whispered secrets from a forgotten era." Ambassador Cale Thorne paced the length of the subterranean vault, eyes scanning relics that shimmered with history far older than any council species could comprehend. "The real question," he said softly, "is whether we reveal it." He gestured toward the artifacts, etched discs, radiant fragments, ancient alloys. that we weren't just explorers. We were guardians. On Zerithkai, behind locked doors and without aides or escorts, the High Concordium convened in absolute privacy. No recordings. No interruptions. Only truth. We cannot engage them militarily, admitted Mector. Our commander said it plainly. We'd be obliterated. And without Terran X 935, added Cyril, our infrastructure collapses. Transit lanes, energy grids, everything. Dravy rose from his seat, voice steady. We must go further than peace, he said. We must offer them leadership of the Concordium. The chamber froze. Zarek's scales trembled with color. You'd surrender control to the youngest species? Perhaps, Dravy said, tapping a glowing data panel. They are not young at all. The ancient report hovered before them, Dr. Zila's analysis of myth, memory, and buried history. All our archives, all our origin myths point to the same truth. Terrans visited our worlds eons ago. They offered aid, intervened when our species faced extinction, then vanished. One by one, the other members read in silence. Reactions shifted. Disbelief gave way to revelation, then an almost quiet relief. If this is real, Zarek murmured, then we haven't been engaging naive newcomers. No, Dravy said. We've been ignoring the galaxy's elders. By nightfall, consensus was reached. The Concordium would send its highest emissaries to Solus, not to pressure, not to posture, but to ask. Earnestly, truthfully. They needed Terrans. And perhaps the galaxy itself did too. The Grand Hall in New Geneva was unlike any other. Sunlight poured through towering windows, striking the polished ironwood floors with golden beams. On this day, the chamber was not just a place of history, but destiny. Humans filled one half of the room. The other held travelers from distant stars, species with scaled skin, glimmering eyes, tendrils, and chitin armor, visibly uneasy under Earth's gravity. President Laura Grant stood at the helm of the Terran delegation. To her right sat Ambassador Thorne, to her left Admiral Vora and General Krell, each one a living symbol of Earth's rebirth. Opposite them, the full 7 of the High Concordium waited. Zarek inclined his head, every movement careful. We thank you for hosting this summit, said President Grant. Her voice carried weight, but not malice. The journey you've made is not lost on us. Zarek bowed slightly, his voice low but clear. We arrive with transparency and humility. The Concordium seeks atonement and alignment. Over the next 3 days, neither side played games. No veiled language, no conditional traps. Just honesty. The Concordium acknowledged its failures, its arrogance, its exploitation. And then they made their offer. Not just inclusion, but equality, sovereignty, and respect. Ambassador Cale Thorne watched them closely, gauging tone, body language. Eyes that once looked down on his people now filled with humility. After 2 decades in diplomatic trenches, he knew the truth when he saw it. The Concordium wasn't posturing anymore. They finally understood. Humans had never been subjects to manage. They were something far older and far deeper. On the final day, President Laura Grant signed the accord. The document was short, elegant, and balanced. Earth would return to galactic society, but this time as an equal, not a subordinate. Human borders would be honored. Their advancements would be exchanged, paid for, credited, respected. Then Dravy rose. There is one more matter, he said. His blue features looked young, but his voice carried centuries of weight. We propose a rotating leadership of the Concordium Council, and we ask that Earth lead first. Gasps echoed through the chamber. The shift was seismic. A species once treated as pupils now offered the helm of the galaxy. Grant looked to her council. Thorne, Admiral Vora, General Krell. Then she turned to the room. We're honored, she said. But humanity doesn't seek thrones. We seek understanding. We want partnership, not dominion. Helix's tendrils twitched in surprise. After all we inflicted, exclusion, surveillance, condescension. You seek no revenge? Vora shook her head. Our retreat was never about control, she said. It was about survival. When the delegation left to ready their departure, Cale Thorne walked the outer gardens with Captain Steelbrooks, the officer who'd helmed the Resilience, the ship that found 3 new life-bearing worlds during Earth's silent exodus. Brooks looked perplexed. We could have taken the reins. Why didn't we? Thorne watched a butterfly hover over a bloom, its wings glinting gold in the fading light. Because strength isn't in conquest, he said. It's in knowing when not to take what you can. That evening, beneath a sky painted with stars and soft music, dignitaries and citizens gathered in New Geneva's Central Hall. Humans mingled with beings of every color and form, laughter and stories flowing like rivers. Zarek approached Dr. Kieran Vale, his expression cautious. Your research, he said quietly. Have you uncovered why your kind vanished from the stars long ago? Why your people erased their legacy and returned to Earth? Vale considered the question, then nodded. We have theories, fragments, warnings written by long-lost ancestors. And, Zarek asked, they believed unchecked progress was eroding the soul of our species. Vale answered. They chose to begin again, to remember compassion, creativity, the wonder of not knowing. Zarek blinked. To forsake greatness for meaning. Sometimes, Vale said, you have to step back to move forward the right way. Above the Earth, the newly constructed interstellar Accord Station shimmered in orbit. Ships from 15 species were docked, some from longtime allies, others from worlds the Concordium had never contacted. Vora stood beside Grant at a high observation window, watching the gathering below. Humans, Arcturians, Vidari, even Vexari sharing drinks and music. Do you think it'll last? Vora asked. This alliance. Grant smiled. Yes, because they finally understand. Power isn't about control. It's about cooperation. Far beyond the edge of known space, on planets with no names, yet, new species looked up at their night skies. They were building their first radios, dreaming of rockets, whispering to the stars. And when they finally reached them, they wouldn't find a throne waiting. They'd find a table, a place in a shared future. And somewhere at the edge of that welcome party, humanity would be waiting, hand extended, just as they had eons before. If this story stirred something in you, if you felt the weight of humanity's legacy, its restraint, and its quiet strength, then don't just scroll past. Subscribe for more tales where Earth stands tall among the stars, where courage isn't loud but undeniable. Like, share, and comment your thoughts, because the next chapter of our future might just begin with a single voice yours.